So let's sit up nice and tall and close the eyes. Taking a nice breath in, a nice breath out, scanning the body from head to toe, just noticing how you feel, what you're carrying with you in this moment. And if there is any constriction, resistance, or hesitation within the body, any avoidance, anything that would distract you away from the moment, then see if you can resolve that, making the decision to be present, to be aware, to receive, to hold space. Breathing in and breathing out. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a breath in. Bowing the head toward the heart, acknowledging all that is. And draw the face back to center. And good morning. Good to see you all. So, today, we're going to continue talking about the yamas, which are so important. The yamas are the 5 guidances to relationship in the world, and also to ourselves. They're how we should treat all other beings and all things, and how we should treat ourselves. And within yoga, it's very interesting, within the lineages, I should say, of yoga, there are some different perspectives. Patanjali, who is oftentimes called the father of yoga, put the yamas first. He suggested that practitioners of yoga should understand what the ethics of relationship are first, before they enter into the more esoteric practices of yoga, like asana and breathing practices and meditation and concentration. He said you need to understand relationship. But then if you read some of the scriptures that were written a bit later, somewhere around the 12th and 13th century, like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, what we find there is that they don't even talk about the ethics. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a manual, it's a technical manual for practicing the physical practices, the subtle practices, and for understanding energetics via the system of chakras in the body. And they don't talk about the ethics. And the reason why they don't talk about the ethics is because there's a place there that says, if you force an individual to comply to ethics, then that individual will eventually go crazy. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But that the person will eventually go crazy because they won't understand. So they suggested that ethics should not be the first thing that's taught. And they both have validity to what they're saying. The thing we have to remember is that, first, Patanjali was a renunciate. And his entire inquiry in life was ethical. He was seeking relationship with God. And as a holy person, he understood that he could not enter into an appropriate relationship with the divine unless he had an appropriate relationship with everything else. So his focus was the sacred. in the 12th and 13th century, the individuals who wrote the Hatha Yoga Pradipika were also holy men, but their audience was a little bit different. Because by then, the practice of yoga was much more popularized than it was 2,000 years earlier, when it was only holy people, renunciates, priests, monks, and the like, priestesses, who were practicing these practices. By the 12th, 13th century, it's more broad. There's a lot more householder involvement. And so I personally feel that this statement that you can't force people to adhere to ethics is true. They have to adhere to ethics of their own accord. And that he was talking from this understanding that a large part of the audience at that point in time was householder, individuals who had full relationship within the world, tied up completely with family and lifestyle and, the public arena. And that to go to those people and to say, you must adhere to non-harming, would be to make them odd within the society that they live in, because society is so reeked with violence. And unless that individual adopts non-violence of their own free will, they will probably not have the inner resolve, strength, and skill to see it through to its potential. We don't force people. You can't force people. If you try to make anybody do anything, they may do it for a little while, but it won't last. And this is what I feel a lot of people miss this point when they start talking about this idea of the yamas, and they're like, well, no, it even says in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika that, the yamas shouldn't be taught first. It also says in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika that any individual who begins practicing yoga or the techniques of yoga and then stays with it and cultivates a regular practice should have as their ultimate goal an understanding of the yamas, the niyamas, the meditation, and the God communion. So they don't just wipe it out. They just say it probably shouldn't come first for individuals who are not spiritually minded. That's all. But you're in a yoga teacher training, and the individuals who come in as visitors to attend the Wisdom Circle, you are spiritually minded. That's why you're here. You're not here because you're a householder. You're here because you are a householder who is spiritually minded and wants to make a difference in the world. So the ethics come first. And this way, when we understand the situation of the yamas and the niyamas and what they have to offer us, if we decide individually to adopt them, then we will also understand what the consequence may be if we don't. And the choice is yours. There will be a consequence for adopting non-harming, and there will be a consequence for not adopting it. And that's your free will. So the yamas, what are they? Well, we've been speaking at great length about ahimsa. Ahimsa is the very first one that Patanjali talks about, and it's non-violence. Don't be violent. Anytime that we're violent, we are not in correct relationship. If I'm violent with you, how can we have honesty? How can we have appreciation and gratitude? If I'm violent with you, or if you're violent with me, what we will have is fear, avoidance, and facade. We won't have honesty. So our relationship will not be correct, or straight-lined, or honest. It will be something else. So So the first yama, ahimsa, is about setting the correct relationship based on no fear. Based on no fear, based on no violence. And based on honesty, which just happens to be another yama. Satya, truthfulness. So non-violence, non-harming leads naturally into truthfulness. It leads naturally also into non-stealing, which is the third yama. It leads naturally into brahmacharya, which is the regulation of your energy, not wasting your energy. And then it also leads naturally into non-grasping, because to grasp something is to be violent, is to take. I want that, give it to me. And then I want extra. And then I want more. And then I want so much, I don't want you to have any. That's a violent act. But think about it, it does happen. You know when it happens? It happens in the supermarket. It happens at the salad bar. It happens when we supersize things.
Black Friday.
It happens on Black Friday. Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we have these 5 beautiful guidelines for conducting relationship. And when we understand these 5, we understand what a healthy relationship looks like. We understand that a healthy relationship of a yoga teacher to a student is one where the teacher does not harm the student. How might a teacher harm a student? By their ego. By pushing the student because the teacher wants to look good. Well, if the student gets that posture, then, it'll look like I taught them how to do it. That's harmful because perhaps the student shouldn't be doing that posture. But also to push, and to cause somebody to perform on your own behalf sets that person up for failure. And sets yourself up for ridiculing that person if they don't perform to your liking. There's not compassion there. A yoga teacher needs to also be truthful with their students about what they can and can't teach them. Truthful with their students about what they should and shouldn't practice. Nowadays in yoga teacher trainings, I hear so often, mula bandha, mula bandha, mula bandha, which is translated as the root lock. And students will ask, they'll say, well, I go into classes and they say in Warrior 1 and in Warrior 2, do the root lock, do the root lock, do the root lock. That's not the root lock. That's not Mula Bandha. That's something like it. But that's not necessarily Mula Bandha, unless you're performing Mula Bandha. But the problem is that most teachers in the West don't know what Mula Bandha is, or what it's meant to feel like. And Mula Bandha is typically a technique that is reserved for meditation, not for movement. Just take my word for it. It's not. I'm not going to go too far into that right now, but a teacher who doesn't have an understanding of that particular technique should not be saying things about it that are not true. They should not call something Mula Bandha if it's not. They should say, this is perhaps a stage 1. That if you practice this, you'll develop the muscle tonality and the awareness necessary to go a little bit closer to this thing called Mula Bandha. And then over time, and with proper guidance, perhaps you'll acquire the Mula Bandha without hurting yourself, tearing your pelvic floor, or having misunderstanding. A teacher needs to practice satya by providing correct understanding, not misunderstanding. So it's okay to teach something like Mula Bandha if you know what you're teaching. So just very briefly, Mula Bandha is the activation of the pelvic floor in a particular way that closes off that orifice so that energy does not escape the body through any orifice below the navel button. So anal, vaginal, or penile. The pelvic floor comes up and the energy is contained in that area of the body, and the abdominal aorta becomes contracted so that the energy is held in the mula and in the svadhisthana and in the manipura. And then the next bandha would contain it even more. So it is hypothetically possible to do a mula bandha only in a posture, but what's being taught today isn't being taught adequately, and a lot of women who already are susceptible to incontinence are finding that they're more incontinent since they've been practicing this thing called Mula Bandha, because it's not being practiced correctly. Yoga will not hurt you if it is practiced correctly. If it is not practiced correctly, it can hurt you very badly. So as teachers, it's super important to understand that and to share that with your students. That I'm not certain of what this is, so I'm going to do a little research or find the right person for you to talk to. Correct relationship. Take that to our family, to our friends, to our coworkers, to our employees, to our employers, and to people that we meet out in society. You know, presenting ourselves with an authentic face of what we know and what we don't know. Asteya, non-stealing. If I come to you and I tell you that I know something that I'm very uncertain about, I'm stealing your trust. If I come to you and I make stuff up, I'm stealing your trust. If I come to you and I tell you things that I know are only half true, then I'm also stealing your ability to understand. I'm stealing your ability to acquire an intellectual understanding of something. Because I have a pretty good idea that you will trust what I say to you, and I have to take that very seriously. So if I don't know something, I need to be honest with you and not steal your ability to acquire proper understanding. This is also written later in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, when he says there are 5 ways that we acquire knowledge, and one of them is false testimony. One of them is receiving incorrect information. So don't be the one providing that. Whether it's from a teacher to a student, or a friend to a friend, or a partner to a partner, or a person to a stranger. Always be honest about what you know and what you don't. And in that way, you empower people to come to a greater understanding, because now you can work together to get the answer. And that's the way we build the bridges, is by saying, you know what, I don't have the answer to this, you don't have the answer to this, let's work together to see if we can find one. Then there's a humbleness across the board, and that empowers all involved. I read an interesting article this morning that said Gates. What's his first name? Bill Gates. In 1996, perhaps, or in the early 90s, I guess, he made, I think it was 10 predictions of things that would happen. And one of them, I think it was like the 9th one, that they listed was that he said, after the year 2000 sometime, what's going to happen is that people are going to come together via the internet for problem solving. And that problem solving is going to have more to do with a person's interests, education, and intention than their location, which prior to that time, it was everything. And that is so true. Because now we can go on the internet and seek out people who have similar interests to us. A little bit less information, a little bit more information, but we can come together as a community and elaborate on everybody's understanding. Isn't that amazing? We don't have to pretend to know it all. We can become part of a community that's working together toward a greater understanding. And in doing so, embracing right relationship. And then we have brahmacharya. And brahmacharya is economy of energy. So, you ever tell a little white lie? Of course you do. Everybody's told a little white lie. And then did you ever get caught up in other little white lies to hold into that first little white lie? And eventually it was a string of little white lies, and now you had to expend all that mental energy to remember what the heck you said to begin with? Such a waste of energy. Just tell the truth. Just be straightforward. And then you don't have to redirect your energy and then try to remember where you redirected it to. All you need to do is just say the way that it is. Straightforwardness. Straightforwardness is a quality that is very highly valued in yoga. Not straightforwardness that's mean or harsh or cruel, but straightforwardness that is just humble and honest. And then you don't have to worry about it. You know, you forgot to do something, you forgot to do it. You don't know something, you don't know it. You're not certain of something, you're not certain of it. That's all. And if other people have an issue with that, the issue is not you. The only issue that someone else would have with your economy of energy in being very straightforward would be that they're afraid to. And they're looking at you saying, I don't think I could ever do that because my fear is too deep. My fear runs the gamut. I can't believe they're being honest like that. And then in our human ear, we are hearing that as a criticism, but it's actually not a criticism. It's an envy or a compliment even. Economy of energy. Eat the right amount of food at the right time so that your body isn't digesting food all the time. Because like any other system, it is meant to function a certain way, and if you keep bombarding it with food and it has to activate the digestive enzymes all the time, eventually it's just not going to know what to expect. You know, it's not going to be able to regulate itself properly. And then your body is going to take the toll for that. And you'll be more susceptible to weight gain or weight loss or whatever the consequence happens to be. Maybe not feeling well, maybe bloating, maybe acquiring allergies that you didn't need to acquire, food sensitivities, stomach aches, lethargy, those types of things. So right relationship with food, economy of energy. Right relationship with drinks, with alcohol, with water. So many people walk around with a gallon of water, drinking a gallon of water every day. In yoga, that's not the best idea. In Ayurveda, that's not the best idea. You should not drink a gallon of water a day. What you should drink is when you're thirsty. And then you should drink enough to quench your thirst. And if you are engaged in an activity that you're dehydrating yourself, then you drink a little more to recoup what you're losing. But if you eat a meal and down a big glass or jug of water, what you're effectively doing is extinguishing your digestive enzymes so that they can't function so well in breaking down that food that you just stuffed your stomach with. So now the food's going to make its way through the stomach, through the duodenum, into the small intestine in a more gross form than it was meant to. And your digestive tract is going to have to expend a lot of energy to move that through. And you won't get the nutritional value that you could have. So, right relationship. You sip a little bit of warm water during or just after your meal, but you don't douse the fire. You know, what do you do when you want to put the campfire out? Throw water on it. You don't want that to happen to your digestive enzymes. Lots of things like that with regard to economy of energy. What about talking? Talking. YTT, a lot of talking. Right after YTT, lots of silence. Tons of silence. No more talking. You know, because you have to recoup that energy. Every time a word comes out, that's an energy. And if those words are not well thought out, and they're not clear, then that's a waste of energy. Because it's something that has to be repeated again in order to be made clear. And maybe again and again and again. Now, some part of that is natural in the process of teaching, but some part of it's not. And, you know, our responsibility is to know which one is which. When we're having conversations with our friends and we're talking and we're gossiping, we're talking about people, we have lots of words that are coming out that are harsh or harmful or not uplifting for anybody involved. That's a waste of energy. It's not practicing brahmacharya. Brahma is many things. Brahma is the maintainer in the triad. Brahma is the creator. In the triad, you have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And Brahma is the aspect of the divine that creates. And Vishnu is the aspect of the divine that maintains. And Shiva is the aspect of the divine that destroys. Or makes space for newness. Yeah. Brahmacharya means to be like Brahma. Brahma is also an aspect of the universal consciousness, separate from that identification with the Creator. It's simply another name for God. So brahmacharyas be like that. And if you're like that, then you're constantly engaged in the mode of creation through consciousness, through conscious awareness. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then we have aparigraha, non-grasping. And in relationship, actually I'm going to go back for a second to the brahmacharya. So if you are investing your energy, your life energy, your conscious energy, your intellectual energy, if you're investing that energy in being a reflection of or being godlike in the qualities that you carry through this world, then you've got the rest in hand. Because that would mean that you treat all with compassion, you treat all with love, you treat all with equanimity, you treat all with kindness. You would not steal from anybody else. You would not waste people's time. You know, so you would be in right relationship automatically. But aparigraha, non-grasping, and that one comes as the fifth one. It comes last in this list of 5. You could say is a subtle reminder that this being human is far messier than we think it is. And while the concept or the idea of brahmacharya may be very attractive, that our base instinct is to grasp, is to take, for me, mine. And that is a very challenging and difficult tendency to overcome. So we start off by saying a dedication, an intention. I'm going to be less violent. I'm going to try not to harm. I'm going to start off by being truthful and not taking what doesn't belong to me in all the ways that can be interpreted. I'm going to really begin to economize my energy and maybe be a little quieter, or maybe be a little bit more introspective, or just not so all over the place messy, And then I need to be mindful, because those intentions are very beautiful. But the moment that you start to criticize yourself, which is a grasping, oh, look at that, I slipped up again. Went back and started gossiping with my friends. Oh, look at that, I slipped up, I went out and I had a steak. Oh, look at that, I suck. I'm just always going to fail. That's grasping. So now the reminder comes around that, well, okay, I'm grasping at self-judgment. That is not kind. That steals my true identity from me. That is not the truth of who I am. To engage in that type of storytelling is not to practice brahmacharya. It's to grasp. So you see how the five weave together so eloquently. So the yamas, these five aspects of right relationship, within a relationship with someone else, a friend or a lover or a stranger, we grasp there because we grasp their attention. We grasp at the meaning of the relationship. We grasp at our expectations within that relationship. And grasping is like a poison. I'm sure everyone here can remember a time when in a relationship you did not get what you felt you needed or deserved, and that became like anger, poison. And it infected the entire relationship in some way, shape, or form. And then suddenly, everything that happened within the relationship was put up against this idea that you weren't getting what you needed. And the anger just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Until you recognized it for what it was. And maybe woke up one day and said, oh my God, I'm grasping. I'm grasping at this idea, at this thought that I'm not getting what I want. When what I should actually be asking myself is, am I receiving what I need? Am I placing myself into a situation where I can practice my skill of nonviolence, my skill of truthfulness, my skill of non-stealing, my skill of brahmacharya, my skill of non-grasping? Am I putting myself into a situation that I don't have skill to be in? So you see, it can be both the question and the answer. These five. They can be the question and the answer. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then, of course, if you're reflecting on a relationship and you're saying, I don't know that I have the skill for this, then you have choice. You can acquire the skill or not. But at least now you can act from a place of knowing rather than a place of assuming, rather than a place of saying it's your fault. It's never one person's fault. There's no relationship. And I know that that's kind of controversial to say, but there is no relationship that is ever only one person's fault. Never. Relationships are not fault. They're relationships, and they're either healthy or they're not healthy. And if they're healthy, it takes two people, or if you're talking about yourself, one person. And if it's not healthy, that's also everyone's involvement. It's not just one. So if there's a relationship in your life where you feel super unhappy, discontent, and even angry, then ask yourself, ahimsa, in what ways are my thoughts, intentions, or expectations causing me to either harm myself or another person, which is further solidifying what this relationship looks like right now? In what ways am I not being truthful? Like when someone asks you, what do you want from me? And you say, I don't know. You need to know what you want. And if you don't know, and you really don't know, then you owe it to yourself to find out. But if that statement, I don't know, is born out of fear of saying what you really feel, lethargy, not wanting to be bothered with the conversation, or confusion, that you're not prepared to say, then you have some work to do so that you can be more clear. Because whatever the other person is doing, they're doing. But from your side of things, from my side of things, it's not really healthy to go into that conversation, to even begin that conversation of you're not giving me what I need or what I want, if in fact you don't even know what the heck that is. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but you're not doing it. That's not the issue. The issue is you don't know what it is. So now you need to find out what it is so that you can look and actually say it is or it is not being done. Does that make sense? Self-responsibility. And self-responsibility is so important. Absolutely important. It's not to let anybody else off the hook for poor behavior. But I will say this, that if you have self-responsibility, it is so much clearer and so much easier to recognize how to deal with that poor behavior rather than stringing it along or being too afraid to take action. Self-responsibility puts you in a position where you can make a clear decision for yourself, one that is healthy, one that will bring about the best possible outcome, rather than staying in the land of confusion and not really knowing what to do or what you want or where you want to go or what you want to be. That's drama. And drama is not a healthy expenditure of energy, typically speaking. There's a time for it, like creativity. It's very dramatic, But when it becomes chaos, it's not a good expenditure of energy. And then we go back again to the grasping, and we just keep going through those 5. And we keep looking at how we can refine our relationships based on having more skill and more skill and more mastery over each one of these qualities, over each one of these ethics. And then eventually what we find out is we really don't need to get angry probably 90% of the times that we do. We don't need to engage in, the kind of flighty, dramatic conversations that we do, probably half of the time at least. We don't need to have so much fear. Probably 95% of our fear is not well-founded. Actually, science has proven that to us already. They've done studies, and they say that worry and fear that when we get these thoughts in our mind, that somewhere on the order of 80% of what we fear and worry about never comes to be. It's a waste of energy. Wouldn't you rather take that and put it into, something else? Like your healing, or your awakening, or making your relationships healthy places for everyone involved. So for a householder, that's what the yamas mean to us. The yamas mean constant examination of self and how we are relating to the world and how we are relating inside of ourselves as well. And then allowing ourselves enough space for the hiccups, for the bumps in the road when we're not really sure, because we carry the constant intention of always learning more, of opening our hearts and our minds up to more and more and more potential. And potential is key. See, the ethics are not constraints. Sometimes people say, well, the word yama means to constrain. We want to constrain your behavior. And I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that at all, actually. It's like when people look at the posture and they think a posture is like this little thing they have to fit into. And they got to contort their body and get real small so they can fit into this little box. That's not it at all. The ethics ask you to open yourself. The posture asks you to get bigger than life. The ethics are asking you to recognize your own potential of healing and to not become artificially small because of fear, hate, confusion, or, unhealthy relationship. And if you need an example of what that's like, right now the one that comes to mind is, some of you probably know somebody, maybe you are somebody, who has been in an abusive relationship. Was that expansive? Did it support you in embracing your potential? Did it allow you to become who you are? No. It was an unhealthy relationship that may have contributed to who you are, but it was in that relationship you did not expand, you shrunk. And having been there myself, I'm really super aware of that. Yes, Aslan?
But what about afterwards? When you realize your potential?
Absolutely.
It doesn't help you.
Yes. Well, it doesn't help you. Clarity helps you. Yeah. So after, I know hindsight is so wonderful. Yeah. After the fact, there is a rejoicing or an embracing of a certain kind of freedom. And you can say that the relationship happened because it was meant to. Absolutely. That there was something there for you to learn. Absolutely. And that the interaction that you had with the individual taught you something. It's absolutely true. The question becomes, is it a habit? Or did you really learn? Or do you go from that relationship into the next relationship which carries the same qualities as that relationship? In which case, you're shrinking. You're shrinking away from who you really are. Relationships should never ask you to shrink. It should only invite you to expand. It should only invite you to embrace your potential, not deny your potential. And of course there's compromise because that's what relationships are. But the reality If you cannot grow as a person within the relationship, then the relationship is not a right relationship. And it gets complicated because, yes, so a person repeats that pattern again and again and again. And in some aspect of yoga, there is this idea, this thought that things are as they are. Period. Until you change them. And the ability to change them is always there. The ability to acquire more clarity, to experience more honesty, to stop stealing from yourself or from others, to be less violent with self or others, to reflect the consciousness that you carry within yourself is always there. Always. Does that? Yeah. Any other questions? Or thoughts? Wow, pretty heavy stuff. What does this have to do with yoga? Everything. Because the word yoga means to unite. The word yoga means union. And union is not the same thing as possession. And union is not the same thing as a story. And union is not the same thing as taking. And union is not the same thing as faking. And union is not the same thing as ignorance. And so if we really want to experience yoga, then we need to know what those things are and behave the opposite. With clear intention, knowingly, openly, honestly, generously, compassionately, and kindly. And then we enter into right relationship. The kind of relationship that not only allows us to grow as individuals, but allows us to grow as a community, and allows us to grow as a world, and allows you to grow, and you to grow, and you to grow, and you to grow within that paradigm. It's amazing what yoga and the ethics of yoga open us up to. By becoming skillful at ahimsa, I'm going to leave you alone. That's like a crazy thought. That's a radical thought. By becoming skillful at ahimsa, it means I'm going to leave you alone. It means that I'm not going to put you into dilemma after dilemma after dilemma for my own entertainment. By becoming skillful at ahimsa, it means that I'm not going to put obstacles in your path on purpose. I'm not going to set you up to fail for my own aggrandizement. I'm not going to do those things. And by you becoming skillful at ahimsa, it means you're not going to do them either. And I guess I kind of feel like anybody who thinks, and this is a judgment, but I feel that anybody who thinks that that is a limiting factor is thinking ignorantly. Bless you. And the ignorance is because of fear. They're afraid who said that? The rose stayed closed, tight in its bud, until remaining in the bud became too painful, and it had to open. Who's that? Anne? Not a nice. Oh, yes, that was a nice nin. And then Maya Angelou said something quite similar also. Yeah, it was a nice nin. She's an interesting person. Beautiful writer. Beautiful writer. Thoughts?
Yesterday in the student center, I picked up the Tao Te Ching, and I was reading a verse that was talking about mercy, and how making that conscious decision to not inflict harm on others or oneself, then you can at least rest in the peace of knowing that you are not preparing yourself to receive that again later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the Tao. So amazing. Yeah. Because we don't want to live in the future, but we do want to know that we're learning, you know? We do want to know that we're not repeating over and over and over again. We want to know that we're growing, expanding, coming closer and closer to who we really are. And I know there are people who say, well, yoga doesn't have a goal. That's not true. Swami Satchidananda even said, look, there's a goal in yoga. It's called awakening. Yeah, that's the biggest possible goal there could be. You know, it's like the big neon lights. And I think it's Swami Shivananda might have been the one to say, and there is grasping in yoga too. And if you are going to grasp at something, then let it be your peace. Grasp at your peace. Put everything else away, but grasp at your peace so that you know that you're practicing what you're intending to practice. So these things can also be talked about in a way that supports us, you know. That if you are going to commit to grasping, just know that grasping is a very human thing. Everybody does it. But you have this thing called free will, so you can choose what you're going to grasp onto. Grasp onto the thing that's healthy. But don't grasp it so tightly that it cuts off circulation, that you start to shrink again. And we see this happen like with diets. You know, people say, oh, I'm going to go on the latest health fad. And then they grasp onto that. And they grasp so tightly that they cut off their own circulation. And suddenly they're having digestive issues. And, excuse me. And, and they're feeling resentment because they can't have their favorite food. And whatever it happens to be. And then they, possibly start developing a deeper issue with food. They don't have to hold it so tightly that it cuts off their circulation and stunts their growth. All they need to do is endeavor and just see what it has to offer and then make the decision that's healthy for them, for you, for me. It's the ethics open us up to a whole different way of being. Now, as yoga teachers, particularly for the yoga teacher trainees in the room, we practice ethics as yoga teachers so that we teach yoga and so that we are ethical teachers. Because in the yoga world, there's a lot of unethical teaching that's happening today. There's a lot of exploitation of students for money, for sex, for popularity, for downloads of classes, whatever competition there is out there. There's a lot of incorrect relationship. So you have a student who comes into class and, a new student, and that student is looking for something. That's why they're there. There's 4 reasons why people come to yoga, period. They're coming to yoga to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. They don't come to yoga for any other reason. Oh no, I know someone who came to yoga because they were curious. What were they curious about? If it could help them. It's all the same. Oh, well, because someone told them that yoga was cool. Well, what did they tell them it was cool? What did they tell them that was cool about it? Well, they said that it gave them extra peace. Okay, same thing. They only come to yoga to heal. People don't come to yoga because they're happy. They come to yoga because they're in search of something. So they walk into your class and they're seeking something that has to do with healing. And you now have the utmost responsibility to hold an ethical space for that student so that you don't harm them out of your own wants and needs. So important. So important. We look at the doctors in the world and we say, well, doctors take an oath not to harm. yoga teachers should take an oath not to harm. Well, they do. It's called karma. Yeah, cause and effect, consequence, that type of thing. And so the ethics are there for us as householders to experience healthier relationships as spiritualists. Anybody here not a spiritualist? Raise your hand. What is a spiritualist? Alejandro, what's the definition of spiritualist? Would you say that it is a person who is seeking spirit?
Seeking the innermost peace and being it.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeking the innermost peace, being that peace, expressing that peace, having a relationship with that peace. Well, the yamas give us a way to do that. Because if we're not practicing ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, then we are practicing violence, dishonesty, greed, grasping, and wasteful energy. And you can't have a spiritual relationship with peace if you're experiencing that, if you're practicing that. They're opposites. They're opposites. It doesn't mean that you can't go out and let your hair down once in a while. Of course you can. But just know that every good night out has a hangover. And is a hangover an experience of peace? No. So have your night out, enjoy it, but just know that, it's not a couple of steps back. It's just a...
Speed bump?
Yes. It's a speed bump in the road. Exactly. What was that asked?
It can be a remembrance of why you don't want to do that.
Completely. Absolutely. Hopefully. Absolutely. Yeah. So any other thoughts or questions? So for the YTTs in the room, are you seeing? So before you came here, how many of you knew what the yamas were? And now that you're here, how many of you know what the yamas are? Yeah. And how many of you see that there is an importance to them? Yeah. Absolutely. In all aspects of life.
It's incredible since I started how they are affecting my daily interactions with people. Very much so.
And let me ask you, do you feel more free or less free?
I feel more free and I feel closer. I feel a sense of closer to the person I'm meant to be, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of grace.
Yeah. Yes.
I feel it also, I don't really zoom out, but it gives you the empowerment to get out of certain situations. So you have that courage and that freedom to just be like,
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely make choices. Absolutely. Carissa.
I'm kind of, you know what I mean? Sometimes my ego will get to me and I'll be like, oh, I'm not really noticing anything, you know what I mean? No changes. But then I'll be sitting there, just kind of sitting like in my bed or something. Then it comes to me, like I've discovered so much peace, and not just peace with how I handle things or how I see certain situations, but peace within myself as well.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Absolutely. So, did you ever hear the political theory that if you cause people to suffer, you can conquer them? Right? Yeah. So when we associate freedom with incorrect relationship, unhealthy relationship that leads us to suffering. When people tell us that, well, this is my choice, they're correct, it is their choice. But that individual is not strong. They are weak in suffering and easily conquered. An individual who is free is an individual who is not suffering as much as others. And it's not that they're not suffering, it's that they have a different relationship with suffering, because we all suffer. That's the first truth that the Buddha found, was that suffering happens to every single human being without exception. But the relationship is different to the suffering. And we don't see the suffering as a mallet coming constantly down on our head, making us smaller and smaller and smaller and putting us into this box. Instead, we say, I have the ability, even in suffering, to be non-harming, to be non-grasping, to be non-stealing, to be truthful, and to still radiate with light, even though I'm suffering. The suffering is not who I am. But a person who thinks that the suffering is who they are, that individual is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And I don't know, I feel like there was something somewhere that I read, wish I could remember exactly what it was, but it was a political paper, and they were talking about how suffering is actually a tactic that's used. You put people into the throes of suffering when you want to conquer them, and then you tell them that, that's their right.
Sounds like an abusive relationship.
What was that?
Sounds like an abusive relationship.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, it's your right to, eat poorly. It's your right to, go out and use life-threatening drugs. It's your right, It's your right to do all these things that could potentially harm you. And it is your right. But just understand that unless you're strong, that those practices will shrink you as a person, not free you. There's a difference between something being your right and something being freeing. And if what we really want is free, and most people that I talk to, that's what they say they're looking for. They say they're looking for freedom in their spirituality. They say they're looking for freedom in their life. Then you need to move away from all those, well, I can do this because it's my right to do it. Well, it is your right to do it, but it's not freeing you. It's constricting you. Find the thing that frees you. Yeah?
It reminds me of something you said in one of your talks. I think it was in reference to smoking. That when you start adopting the yamas or adopting non-harming, that you actually find yourself when you get into that place of questioning yourself and realizing oh, this is harmful to me, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. And it's easier to not do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. It's called independent thought. Yeah. So we begin to think independently of what mass media tells us. We start to say, well, you know what, maybe I don't have to dye my hair anymore. Maybe I don't have to go out on the latest diet or these other things that are being mass marketed to us. Maybe that's not the best thing in the world for me. Let me sit with this for some time and make an informed decision about what's going to expand my freedom. And if you are constricting more and more and more and more what you eat, so that pretty soon, you're eating nothing, or no fat in your diet, or only meat. What is that one? Isn't there one that's only?
Yeah.
Which one?
The Atkins diet.
Atkins diet. Yeah. Is the keto like that too? Is that the same? No. Yeah. Yeah. So then you can't have the enjoyment of a fresh piece of fruit. There's no freedom there. That's not freedom. And even if you choose to be a vegetarian, even if you choose to be a vegan, you are taking away a freedom of choice from yourself. But the difference is that you are eliminating that choice on behalf of another being so that you don't commit harm to them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, I love yoga. And I love the yamas and the niyamas. And I hope you love them too. I hope you love them and that you're inspired by them. To dive into what freedom is for you in this life. What it really is for you. And what path is really going to bring you there. I know in my own life, and we can only ever speak from our own experience, the yamas and niyamas, the ethics of yoga, to me, they've been the answer to everything. I've never come across a situation, a dilemma, a problem, that they have not immediately had an answer to. Whether I wanted to listen to that answer or not was another question. But they've always, been very clear, very clear. Yeah. All right, so let's take a little break. Sit up nice and tall. Close the eyes. Take a nice breath in, a nice breath out. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, economy of energy, non-grasping. May we begin a deep inquiry into how these practices open our life to being lighter, more graceful, freer, happier, and healthier. And placing the right hand on the heart and the left hand over the right. We'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. Namaste. Thank you to those coming in to visit us today. Good to see you. And for the YTTs, take a 5-minute bathroom break and then come back because you have a little exercise to do. Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes.